All right, welcome aboard, everybody. For the last class, we've got some guests from the Sunday and Tuesday sessions as well. And we're going to proceed with 3 presentations at the beginning of class. And the general idea for these presentations is to find an artist that you're intrigued by, select one artwork that resonates with you, to help us through a reading of that artwork and maybe some personal connection, and then to maybe, depending on how much information there is, elaborate on any connection that that artwork might have with the artist. Perhaps it might have something to do with upheavals in his time, but that's not necessary. The goal here is I've presented 6 artists, and this is to get an artist that you, if you were doing a presentation, that you were particularly intrigued by. So we're going to do those 3 presentations, and afterwards we'll have a recap game and a few questions, and then if we have time, I'll have one final artwork. If we have time, we'll have one final artwork. But the gist here is we're going to spend time for the second half of class with these artists that we've gotten to know pretty well, and get a better sense of their individual spirit, especially by contrasting them to other artists. And we'll have a couple of little different activities as we're doing that. So I want to start with presentations, and the 3 presentations are going to be from Zach, from Matan, and from Kim. And we're going to start with Zach, and I'm going to go ahead and turn my video off. And Zach, if you want to go ahead and turn your video on and speak and see what happens.
Hello, can you hear me?
All right, can everybody hear and see Zach? All right. Okay, so yeah, I can't see him because I stole the mic away from him when I started speaking, but he'll get the mic back. He'll get the video back once he starts speaking again. I'm going to show his artwork for 2 seconds and put a quick title in the chat like we've always done. Quick title in the chat, that's it. And then he's going to take it from there. So here's the artwork. And quick title in the chat. First impression, first words. Not funny, not so funny after all, sad clown, quiet contemplation, unhappy court jester, joker slumped with a party in the other room. So sad. All right, great. Zach,
Yeah.
all yours.
Okay, so I titled this, my first glance was The Sad Clown, and here's my reading. There's a jester sitting alone, slouched in his chair. His fingers are interlaced and feet are outstretched. His eyes are fixed ahead. He's not looking at anything in particular, but has that stare that you have when you're in deep thought. The thought he has is clearly concerning to him. It's not a happy thought. So what's he thinking about? We can see that there's a party going on in the next room behind him. We see a man and a woman in fancy garb. He looks like he's talking to her closely, as if the party is really loud. There's a man with a proper mustache to the left of them, and a chandelier peeking out the top right. This looks like a proper party, fancy party. Probably the party he was entertaining. The room the jester is in is covered in drapes, and I picture it dimming the noise of the party. Is he about to head in to entertain everyone, or is he on his break, or did he leave the party? We see his marotte laying on the floor. I had to Google that, by the way. That's a jester's wand laying on the floor next to him. So he didn't place it on the table. He just dropped it without care. From this action, I think that he was at the party and left. Something must have happened or is weighing heavy on his mind, so much so that he cannot play jester tonight. He cannot fake the joy, and he's not in the mood for celebration. He found this room off to the side and hid away to be alone with his thoughts. Alone, he's still, so none of the bells jingle on his hat, thinking of what lies ahead and how he's going to act. He might be saying, how do they not see it? Well, how can they party right now? So the title of this painting is Stanzik during the ball at the court of Queen Bona in the face of the loss of Smalznik. It's a long title, but basically they're partying as there's clearly a war or revolution going on, and one of the key towns has fallen. And he's thinking, how can they party right now? This is so in the face of peril, the fall of a key town in war, the party goes on, ignoring the reality of the situation. And only the jester sees the magnitude of what's about to come. So now you step back and imagine yourself as the jester. Is there a time in your life when you found yourself alone with your beliefs? Have you been at a dinner party or a family event and you sought to hide away in that secret room? I think everyone has that. The painter was Jan Majenko. He's Polish, so it's very hard to pronounce his title. Jan Macieko. He used himself as a model for this painting. So it's the same, it looks identical. And so from his Wikipedia, that's as far as I researched, but at a young age, he witnessed the Krakow Revolution of 1846 and the siege of Krakow by the Austrians, the two events which ended the existence of the free city of Krakow. His two older brothers served in these battles. One died and one was forced into exile. And he did this painting at 24. And so maybe this is how he felt when he was seeing his world crumble, wanting to be alone and thinking of what's to come. That's it. That's all I have.
All right, fantastic. Any questions or thoughts?
Was he actually a jester, or was that just symbolic?
Oh, so symbolic. So I guess this jester in Poland is kind of like a famous jester. He shows up throughout history to symbolize certain things. So people use him as he's very common in paintings and art. So he's a famous, so Stanzik is his name, I guess, or that's how you say it.
Okay, thank you.
And Molly is asking, a personal connection to you?
No, not really. I like to play the jester and, cheer everyone up, but I just kind of found it and I liked it. Can you spell the pages? Yeah, I can paste it in right now. Hold on. Just close my.
And as you're typing that in, one question I have for you, Zach, is that's an interesting connection that you're making between this painting and his life and how he witnesses his brother's demise. And maybe others don't have the same profound reaction he does to it. Do you get a sense that, have you seen other of his works capture a same kind of alienation from others in society, a little bit like this one?
His other works?
Yeah.
I haven't really looked at very many, but yeah, I don't know. Well, what's on the table, Amy? So that's a good question. I left that out because there's some controversy when I was reading. It has a date on it, and it looks like some formal documents. So it could just add. The idea is it's symbolizing the fall. It's like, this letter may read, that city has fallen. and announcing it to like the royalty. Like, and he happened to read it. That's the idea, but you don't really know.
All right. Any final thoughts or questions for Zach?
Oh, and how did I select this, Kim? I typed into Google sad clown because a lot of my I love comedy, and a lot of my like comedic heroes died tragically, like, you know, Chris Farley and Robin Williams and all those guys. And they seem to be sad inside, even though they entertained everyone else. And then this painting came up, and that's when I selected it. Amy, that's a good point. I don't know. I suspect they knew because it looks like it has a wax seal on the letter. So I'm guessing that you're probably not allowed to open a royal letter if it's not yours. And so I think the purpose was that they had read it, and he's reading it after them. Cool.
All right. And Damon and Susanna, you're comparing to Rockwell's painting of the father at the radio. How would you compare them? What would you say, if that's you, Damon?
Well, first of all, I was just, wondering what the document is, and kind of imagining it as it could be the map of the troop movements, right? And he's alone, obviously very focused on the war or the events, although he's obviously in a different state. He's not just following it in action. He's kind of waiting for the doom, I guess. But it's, and obviously he's not alone here, which adds kind of a different emotional contrast, where it's like betrayal of say, whatever, the upper class or the rich, they're unconcerned, whereas the father's really just alone and very focused. But it's a similar situation, and even him sitting in front of a map or document of some importance is similar. So that's
and if we were doing that exercise, Damon, that we did last week, where we put them side by side and just started off with what's similar first and then what's different about them, I get the suspicion that we would see a clearly different spirit of Rockwell's versus this artist's. Zach, thank you very much for sharing this painting and for introducing me to this artist, because I've never heard of this artist before, and I'm very intrigued. There's a lot of narrative richness here, lots of story, and a very fascinating kind of moment.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the opportunity.
All right, you bet. Okay, so now we'll go on to our next presentation, and that will be Matan. And Matan, you've got the PowerPoint on your end, so I'm going to stop the share on my end. And go ahead and unmute yourself and turn on your video when you're ready, and we'll make sure that we can hear you and see you just fine.
Okay, can you hear me all right?
Can everybody hear Matan all right? Try again. Try speaking again, Matan.
Hello, everyone.
All right. Okay, good. So we can hear you pretty well. A little bit quiet, but I think if you speak loudly, you'll be just fine.
I'll use my outside voice.
All right. It's
okay.
Will you show us the artwork for 2 seconds and then go back to your presentations page?
Sure.
Okay.
Here we go.
All right. So quick title for this artwork in the chat. All right, so we have listening, faces in the light, political discussion. He is there at the kids' table. I've come for you. The meeting in the pub, and dispute. say what. All right, Matan, it's all yours.
All right, great. So for me, I first gave this title, my 2-second title was Sitting in a Tavern. And what we have here is a group of 5 men. The men at the table are wearing some pretty nice clothes, looking pretty pompous. One of them even has a sword. 3 of them are looking at 2 men who are approaching them. And the men who are approaching them are pointing. The older man seems to have traveled. He seems to be barefoot. He has a cane. He's here for something. And it looks like the younger person has a halo on his head. Is that Jesus? But who are they pointing at? It seems that even the men at the table aren't sure of this. They look curious and surprised. I can imagine the bigger fellow pointing at himself and saying, "Me?" Or is he pointing at the man looking down on his right or on our left, saying, "Him?" The 2 men looking down are too busy to pay attention. They're busy. But busy doing what? It looks like they're counting money. They are indoors and the room is dark. Light is penetrating the room, strongly illuminating the man sitting down. Is it a bar? Is it really a tavern, like I first guessed? The air in the room is slightly thick. A musky smell to it. So, who are these men sitting in this dark room with swords, counting money, bookkeeping? And what does Jesus and this older man want from them? So this is called the calling of Saint Matthew. And from the Bible, for those who are unfamiliar, like I was, when I discovered this, Matthew was a tax collector. So he was living a life of a sinner, even by today's standards. And this scene is depicting the point where Jesus calls upon Matthew to abandon that life of a sinner and become a disciple. So what we have here is a moment that's showing Matthew, this person in the middle, this big fellow with pointing at himself, straddling the 2 worlds, the world of tax, money, and sin on the left here, and the world of Christianity and the light on the right. So it's a point where something in your life has come to be. And there's a moment where you need to decide which side or what are you going to do? And how is this going to change your life forever? And questions, have you ever had a time in your life where you've had to make a choice to make and your life would never be the same again? So for me, that was a point where about 6 years ago, I was going to go down the path of becoming a doctor. And I discovered that there was an opportunity for me to actually do something called medical illustration and use art and combine that with science to teach the biomedical subjects. And I found that I was kind of straddling these two worlds. Not that being a doctor is a sin or anything like that, but it was going down one path or another. And it was a difficult choice, but once I made that choice, I felt like my path was definitely never the same again. And so a question we might ask ourselves, as we have been doing for every painting, is, Caravaggio, was there a time where you felt your life has changed forever, where you were straddling these 2 worlds? And some background about Caravaggio is that he's not very similar to a lot of the other painters that we've talked about. He was actually, on top of being troubled, he was quite touchy and very violent. There are multiple accounts of him getting into brawls on the streets. which is not very similar to some of the artists that we've talked about. Definitely not an introvert. And there was even one time or a story of him getting into a fight and killing a man, which forced him to flee to Naples. And what he had to do was pursue a pardon for his sentence. And he went and tried to do, to use his artwork and to get a pardon. And in the end, he died under suspicion. There's a bit of controversy about how he died. And unfortunately for him, it's not, I think there was a point where once he killed this person, there was no going back. And he had to flee from town to town and eventually maybe even got murdered for it himself. And so while that's not on a positive, we're not ending on a positive note, I'd like to say thank you. And maybe you can reflect upon a time in your life where you've had something like this.
All right, wonderful, Matan. Questions, thoughts from Matan? And Molly's asking, why are some of the figures so young looking?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one I am not particularly sure about. As I would imagine tax collectors would be a bit older, such as the older man on the left. There is some suspicion that Caravaggio liked men, and potentially young men. And there are a lot of paintings, or as you look through his artworks, there are actually a lot of paintings that are depicting kind of younger men. So I also wonder if that kind of influenced who he was painting or who he decided to insert in this. And Damon and Susanna, the two men at the door. So the person with the halo is Jesus. And this is actually something I didn't pick up on early on. It's like that there's a halo there. So the idea is that Jesus here, and I think that is St. Paul, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, is here to come and get St. or Matthew to follow them and become a disciple. So yes, the one with the halo is Jesus, and the older man could potentially be St. Paul.
Matan, a quick question from, oh wait, Molly's asking, is Matthew the one bent over?
Yes. So Matthew is, this is also something that could be interpreted differently. Initially, I thought this person who is pointing, the older man with a beard pointing, was pointing at the one bent over. But you could also be thinking that he's pointing at himself. And after looking online, it seems like in the church that this painting's placed in, there are also two more paintings that Caravaggio did of St. Matthew's. And that person does look like, seem to be like this person, the bigger man in the middle, rather than the person being bent over.
And then I've got one more quick question, Matan. So that portrait that you showed of Caravaggio, do you have any idea whether it was done by someone else or was it a self-portrait?
That is a great question. I do not know.
All right.
On that note, though, he did have an interesting painting where he did insert himself into paintings a few times. Specifically, an example of it is David and Goliath, where he was, Goliath's head was actually Caravaggio's head. So he put it in some comical ways or sad ways. Yes.
Then Ron is asking, is the man in the white feather hat or a man or a woman?
I believe it is a man, based off the clothes that they're wearing. Everyone seems to be wearing the tights and the more pompous tops, but they do look a little bit feminine, especially with those feathers on top of their heads.
All right. With feathers on top of our heads, that will end Matan. Thank you very much, Matan. That was great, and thanks for the opportunity to get into Caravaggio a little bit. And I knew a little bit about him, but spending some time on the research that you did was wonderful. And the feistiness that you described, him getting in fights, that seems to be a real part of his spirit, and it shows through in a lot of his works.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so now we'll have one more presentation, and I'm going to share my screen. And Kim, let me get you in video. And Kim, if you want to unmute yourself and try to get yourself back on video there. I'm going to, and I think yours is going to be the next one. I think I've got that correctly. Would you say hi, Kim, and just a little bit so we can make sure we can hear
Hi,
you?
everybody. Are you hearing me correctly? Am I coming through loud and clear?
Yes.
All right. Okay, great. Yes. So, Kim, I'm going to show the artwork for 2 seconds, and we'll do quick titles in the chat, and then it'll be all yours. So here it is. All right, what's your quick title in the chat? All right, we've got splitting ways. She said no. Disagreement at the garden. I am pleased with myself. Graceful patience. Growing apart. And Suzanne also says she said no. Toying with him. All right. Great. So, Kim, it's all yours.
Interesting comments there. When I first discussed this painting with Luke, he convinced me of another scenario. So let me know what you think of this. Early this morning, she had risen with eager anticipation. This was the only day this week she had no chaperone, and she was meeting him in a few hours. Cloudy skies had not dampened her mood in the slightest. She had chosen her outfit very carefully, selecting her favorites. The dress with the pink rose fabric, complete with white lace and pink trim, the bonnet with pink roses and ribbons, and the pink shoes. Then she'd been restless, unable to settle down to any productive task, watching the clock. She had, however, calculated the exact time she should be leaving to ensure that she arrived at exactly the right time. On her way, she'd skipped a few times in sheer delight. She was to meet him in the usual place, one she enjoyed being in, at a makeshift seat in the horticulturally sculpted parkland around his family home. It was always cool and pleasant amongst the trees beside the canal path on a warm summer day. They arrived at the same time. He'd been carrying a bunch of pink roses, and she'd smiled. He knew they were her favorites. He'd put the flowers in her hands, then cupped her face with his hands and kissed her gently before settling her down on the tether post. This is different, said a strange sensation in her belly. They usually walk with interlinked fingers through the parklands and find a pleasant place to rest, where he lies with his head on her lap. She's now tense and alarmed, and she's right. He tells her that this is the last time they can see each other. Their sweet love affair has to end. Why? She asked. What's the matter? Pink petals are adhering to her now slick, sweaty fingers, and she finds that she's no longer seated. He hems and haws, words spilling from his lips in a frantic cascade that barely makes sense. The gist of it is that his family won't tolerate him, considering a bride who has no background and no dowry. She flings the bouquet to the ground, single blooms and forcibly separated petals scattering across the path and amongst the daisies, then slowly sinks back into her abandoned seat. She changes her posture in total defiance. As he turns and walks back along the path towards the family residence, his posture indicating sorrow and remorse, she realizes that he's chosen to abide by his mother's wishes rather than be disowned. Anger and despair rage in her, vying for prominence, and a wave of heat flushes her face. She realizes how weak he is, and she holds back her tears with stubborn defiance. She will never make this mistake again. Who'd have thought there were so many artists with the name of Leighton? I came across this one quite serendipitously. Edmund Blair Leighton's dates are 1852 to 1922. He died 102 years after the end of the Regency period, which was 1811 more or less to 1820. The fashions and manners of which he used a great deal in his non-medieval works. As in my selection, his Regency compositions are somewhat fanciful and often anachronistic. For instance, that canal is currently disused, and in 1806, the height of the canal building portion of the industry in Britain has reached its peak. That should have been a very busy canal. EBR was fascinated by romance and love relationships. Many of his paintings depict various aspects of these, like flirting and courtships, secret meetings, affairs, proposals, rejections, elopements, and weddings. His style is crisp and clear and almost photographic. Just look at the detail in the young tree behind the girl and the windows of the house. See how her face is defiant at first glance? But zoom in, and it's obviously she's struggling to maintain her composure. Little is known about this artist. He had a rather unhappy childhood, apparently. And his father, also an artist named Leighton, died when he was 3. He was the middle child of 3 and the only son, so he was sent away to school and the girls stayed home. Not a nice life for a little boy. He first made a living in the tea business after his education to support his family before saving enough money to go to night classes. And then he worked as an illustrator for several years, and perhaps this honed his skill in showing detail. He was rather prolific, completing over 120 paintings in total. So like Waterhouse, who was a contemporary, he was successful in the first part of his career and much forgotten in the later years with changing tastes in art. Waterhouse's style, though leaning to the impressionistic, sometimes shows the photographic look too. In Gossip, a Victorian backyard scene, one can almost hear the lively chatter of the ladies and want to bring the young mother's attention to the 2-year-old who is bound and determined to remove her shoes and socks. It makes one think, these houses are still being upgraded and renovated right now, today. I found another painting by EBL on the ARC site, also called Off, but dated 1911. Although the same type of moment is shown, albeit with a working class couple, I'm not so sure that this is not an error in curation. In this one, however, the girl is visibly more upset and her gruff one-time suitor less perturbed by the breakup. And that's it, everybody. You got any questions for me?
Kim, I'll just first chime in and say, not only would I enjoy hearing you narrate some 19th century novels, but I'd enjoy hearing you narrate your own literature that you wrote. So wonderful reading, and I loved how all the details of the story that you put together seemed to fit in nicely with what I was seeing, what was implied in what I was seeing. All right, questions, thoughts? Damon is asking, could you write the name of the painter? I think I can do that. I can do that.
I've got it.
Yeah. Is it Edmund with a U or an a U? Got it. I put down.
Oh, I've got caps lock on.
And Amy, there's the face of the woman again. I'm sorry, don't have a closer image of this one. I've got a follow-up question. Kim, you mentioned as a preface that our discussion led you to a different interpretation of what was going on. So what was your original interpretation and how did it change?
My original one was that she was the one who had rejected him. And that was very similar to a lot of the immediate impressions that the group presented. So it was interesting that I actually, on consideration, changed my mind about what was going on here.
And then what was it that you saw that made you change your mind? I don't remember.
The
So,
close-up
yeah,
of her face.
the close-up of her face. Yeah.
So although the posture is exceptionally defiant, those eyes, she is very definitely almost at breaking point. And she's not the one that sent him away.
I'm sorry, Ron, I can't zoom in anymore. I can't help, but I've got one more question, Kim.
Sure.
Did you find anything in his biography about his relationships with women?
No, only that he married and had children. Very, very brief.
All right. Any final thoughts or questions for Kim? And Zach, you point out she's holding her knee just like she's holding herself together. Mm. All right.
I would like to point out, though, that compared to the last two presentations, this one is almost Barbara Cartlandish. Vastly different.
So wait, could you? What do you mean? What's the reference? I don't know Barbara Cartland.
Barbara Cartland churned off hundreds and hundreds of cheap boy meets girl romance stories.
Well, it sounds like there's a reason why there were hundreds and hundreds, because it was compelling. Kim, thank you very much, and I'm intrigued in seeing more of Edmund Blair Leighton's heartbreak paintings. Thank you. Okay.
The happy ones are better.
Okay, good. Good. All right. So
Bye
Zach,
now.
Zach, Matan, and Kim, thank you all very much for those presentations and showing us a few different spirits of artists. Yeah, three different senses of life here, but all kind of upheavals in these artists, in these characters' lives. All right, so now, don't say that, Ron. I'd love that. Yeah, I'd love it if everybody gave me more of a run for my money. Yeah. Okay, and let's see. I think we're ready to transfer over to my portion here. So Chuck and Karen, yeah, thanks for stopping by. And
Thank you.
yeah, You bet. And let's see, if you're here from another session, feel free to stick around if you'd like. But that's it for the presentations for this evening. Okay, so we're going to do a recap, and we're going to go back through the artists, and I think I'm going to do this pretty quickly. I've done different variations of these, different variations of this kind of quick game with the Sunday session and the Tuesday session, and I'm calculating in my mind the time needed right now for what we're going to do, and I think I'm gonna share a lot. I think we'll quickly look at these images. I'll give my titles. We're not going to be very formal about it. If you want to give your, we're going to look back at the main artworks and also the mood setting artworks of each artist. And if you want to put down quick titles or anything you remember about these in the chat as we're going along, because we're going to go along pretty quickly, please do. And then there's going to be one particular thing that I'm going to ask, which is to vote on my top 5. My top 5, what would they paint if they were here today? So I've gotten from all the sessions my favorites, maybe I've added a couple more, of what would they paint if they were here today. And I'll have my number 1, but I'll be curious to see what your favorite is. So here we go. Norman Rockwell. Oh, this is the background, mood, spirit of the artist, and I've picked out 5 words. Some of them I really like. Some of them, maybe I feel like I've left out. And I'll be curious to see if you have any quick reactions to these 5 words. I've tried to distill them down into what I thought were the essential ones and to eliminate synonyms. So I've got playful, earnest, benevolent, wholesome, optimistic. And Ron, you've got Americana. And that's an interesting word. I've seen that pop up a couple of other times. And I think one of the things with these words is that I'm trying as much as possible capture a feeling of being in this realm. And maybe with the feelings that are implied by the concept of Americana, I'd buy it. So my follow-up question, Ron, would be, what do you feel when you think of Americana? And Kim, you're thinking wonderfully benevolent. So maybe I could see Americana with the associated feelings like optimism, something like that. But I'm thinking more of the sense of life that you have, the feeling that you have as you enter into this realm.
Yeah, it's more the America, the way I envisioned it when I first thought about coming over. Optimism, livelihood, happy, joyful. But he seems to display everyday life, but in some specific cases. I mean, a boy coming back from the army or father listening to the war is not maybe every day, but it gives me a sense of America through the period.
Yeah, gotcha. Molly, you're adding affectionate, like a puppy licking your face. Yeah, I could see that. I could see that. All right, and the 3 that we spent time with, of course, are this one, the parents who are protecting their children from the knowledge of the horrors that are going on in the world. Molly, you have, all these people have affection for each other. There is a lot of affection. Yeah, that's true. And this father who is tuning in to try to find out as much as possible for what his sons are going through. Oh, yeah, you know what, Molly? Affection, there's something about that. And maybe I'm thinking of it through benevolence. Maybe that's what I'm trying to capture with that term. But there's even a little bit more. There's a caring and a show of that caring, yeah. And the positive spin in the caring. Even the cats are affectionate. then you remember this figure here, the soldier who is showing off to his mom his new skills that he's got to develop as he's far away from home. All right, so the dog, the way he holds the needle. Yeah, the dog is there. Yep, yep. It's true. Embracing the needle with his 3 fingers. Mm-hmm. All right, so here are my top 5 of what would Rockwell paint if he were here today. And then I'll ask you to vote on which one you like best, or if there's something else. Connection, love. Oh, I like those. Number 5, children talking to their teachers across screens. So more of that connection, more of that love. Number 4, someone cutting their own hair. Number 3, my number 3, frustrated parents homeschooling while trying to work. Number 2, exasperation, yeah. He'd paint a takeout restaurant at the curb with people hanging out waiting for food. Maybe a sense of community there. The hand-painted menu, children playing on a deserted playground. Kim saw some painting yesterday of medics and masks. He'd do those. Mm-hmm. And then here's my number 1 for what he might paint. He would paint a Zoom conference with maybe all the foibles that go along with that. So is there one of these that you'd vote for, or is there something else? So 1 through 5 in the chat, or if you've got a wild card that you want to throw in. Molly says 2 or 4. Lee 2 or 3. Zach 4. Kim 4. Marilyn, you got Zoom happy hour or Zoom date. Amy number 4. Matan number 2. Damon number 1. So it looks like it's leaning mostly to number 2 and number 4. And Susanna, number 4 as well. And Molly, you'd have number 4, but it'd be a self-portrait. Yeah, I could see him kind of like the self-portrait we have here, a little bit of self-mockery in his own depiction. Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. And Amy, the haircut is so simple and could be so silly and fun. Gentle self-mockery. That's a great way to describe it. All right, great. So Rembrandt. Here are my 5 words. Darkness, drama, solemnity, despair, and sympathy. And I think the big one for me here is sympathy. It's one that I would not have had at the outset of this course, and maybe I didn't even have when we first explored Rembrandt and got to know him. But comparing him to other artists, maybe especially Goya and Waterhouse, that seems to be something that comes across a little bit more in many of his works. So darkness, drama, solemnity, despair, and sympathy. And Molly got the tenderness with which he paints the faces and all their emotions. Oh, especially with the girl with the dagger. Mm. Yeah, kind of tenderness. All right, and here are the ones that we explored together. Of course, we talked about the prodigal son last time as he returns, and the caring that he's showing there. And Matan, you love that one. Mm-hmm. And you'll remember this one. I'd love to see this one in person to really focus in on the adulteress with Jesus. We talked about this one last time too. And they're also a little bit more of that kindness and compassion. Oh, I got to find out, Amy, now where it is. So, because I think it'd be a great one to see in person. And Saul and David. And he's consumed by his madness, his doubts, and can be soothed by the lyre of David. So, with these three and the others for background, a harp. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Kim. Yeah. What would Rembrandt paint if you were here today? So here are my top 5. And Molly, you've got soothing sympathy for a patient or someone grieving a lost one. So here's my number 5. Mourners at the grave. I like yours, Molly. Number 4, sickness alone in bed. Number 3, dying alone. And number 2, loneliness in an assisted living home. You know, Molly, I'm thinking more, I'm liking yours compared to these so far. Soothing sympathy for a patient. Okay, here's one more. Let's see what happens with this one. He would still be painting himself. I think it was one of you that that had that one. Maybe was it Matan? Yeah, but you know what? I think I'm changing my number 2 or maybe my number 1 to Molly's. Soothing sympathy for a patient or someone grieving a lost one. Okay, vote for yours and you can, well, you haven't won yet, Molly. Vote for yours. You can have Molly's, you can just put Molly's. And Kim, you think he was very empathetic. He felt everyone's despair. Mm. Oh. Yeah. I hadn't thought of it that way, Kim. But I really, really like the way you're thinking about it, about the mindset that he has and the mindset that a lot of his characters have. That's the father and the prodigal son. Okay, so got a couple from Molly's. Got number 2, loneliness in an assisted living home. Yeah, that one, as I thought more about it, that seemed very resonant, especially with the social distancing that's prevented visitation. And Marilyn, you love the look on his face in the self-portraits. And Molly got Rockwell's affection comes through for the light things, Rembrandt's sympathy for the darker things. That's a great comparison. Any others vote, or are we declaring Molly as the winner? All right, I'm gonna go through quickly here. Here's the next one. Friedrich, here are my 5 words. Solitude, overwhelming, contemplation, stillness, and searching. Solitude, overwhelming, contemplation, stillness, and searching. Yeah, that was somebody's word. And I like that word a lot for these. These are figures who are going out and searching for somebody, not searching for something in particular, but the feeling of searching in general. The force of nature. You're saying, Damon and Susanna. That's Cornelia is searching for a burger. Reflecting. Mm-hmm. There's one word that I changed, and I had awe-inspiring, and I changed that to overwhelming. If I had another, add another to this, a sixth word, it'd probably be awe-inspiring or reverent, something like that. All right, so here are the ones we spent time with. The couple looking at the moonrise. And we also had, oh, did I just throw these all together? Yeah, here's this one. The crushing ice of that ship. The overwhelming woods. And all three together that we spent time with. Yeah, Damon and Susanna, nature, I would say more than a lot of other artists, even landscape artists. Friedrich sees the trees especially maybe as characters. All right, so here are my top 5. That's an interesting observation, Kim. I don't know if there's a brief, quick description of that, of how it's opposite that you can put in the chat. That'd be an interesting follow-up. All right, so what would Caspar paint if he were here today? Here are my top 5. An empty city at dusk, where the dark buildings look ominous. Number 4. A solitary figure on a deserted beach. Oh, Kim, thank you. And Molly, yeah, nature to be controlled, must be obeyed. And maybe for Caspar, nature must be obeyed. So a solitary figure on a beach is my number 4. Number 3, a patient in quarantine for a long time going out for a walk in the forest. Number 2, a doctor on the threshold of a hospital entrance. And here's my number 1 from all those that I heard. A solitary individual looking out an apartment window dwarfed by the buildings of New York City. All right, which one are you thinking here? A couple number 1s. Kim, number 1. Matan, number 3, a patient in quarantine for a long time. Lee, number 1. Amy, number 1, but nature. And Marilyn, number 1. And Matan, you're not sure if Caspar would have liked skyscrapers. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. That's true. And Molly, it could include some ominous sky and clouds. All right, great. So we're going forward quickly with Vermeer. And here are my 5 words. Simplicity, contemplative, home. And Ron, this is a word like Americana where the feelings associated with home are what I'm especially interested in. And I feel like that word home combines a lot of comfort, wholesomeness, all these kinds of things that might be implied in that word. And then mindful and serenity. And Matan, I think I stole mindful from you. Americana in Holland. And Amy, practical life. Yeah. Well, there's so much. The more I look at Vermeer, the more I have a sense that he's so interested in what's going on inside somebody's mind. And Marilyn, you've got homely. Okay, so remember the lace maker, very assiduously spending time there with her work. The milkmaid, carefully pouring And the girl with the balance, the lady with the balance, as she is making sure it's balanced, and maybe her mind is wandering to something, some more profound thoughts, perhaps suggested by the painting of the Last Judgment behind her. And Molly, you've got admiration to feeling and admiring. It's so slow and appreciating. I see. Patient enjoyment. Patient enjoyment, yeah. So, with these three and the others, here's my top 5 of what he would paint if he were here today. Number 5, tending to a sourdough starter. Oh, Molly, vaccine development. Yeah, that's something that you have to do very patiently. Number 4, a woman washing her hands. Number 3, doing a puzzle on a weekday morning. Number 2, grocery store clerk stocking shelves. And number 1, which might be similar to the vaccine development one, here's my number 1, a nurse setting up tools prior to a procedure. All right, which one do you think best fits? Damon and Susanna, number 5. Amy, number 5. Molly and Kim, number 4. And Lee, number 4 and 5. I'd agree, Ron. It'll be a woman. Marilyn and Matan, number 4. Blue shirt. Hair and braids. And Ron, yeah, number 4. Okay, great. So it looks like a lot of number 4s here. All right, Goya. So here are my 5 words. Darkness, terror, agony, doom, macabre. And Molly got washing her hands before she develops the vaccine. I don't think there's going to be much vaccine development in Goya's world. No, no, Molly, no, yeah, I totally got that. I was just transitioning, making the observation that it would not be happening here. So those are my 5 words. I think macabre is the one that kind of associate with darkness there to describe the weirdness. I saw weird a lot as a word, the creepiness. This guy would release the virus. Okay, so 3rd of May, the terror of the put down of the rebellion, of the execution of these rebels. And Molly, I don't know what Chaz is. I don't, if you want to follow up on that. And then we had, if you remember this one, these monks that were drinking. Nobody can see us, they say. And more satire. Yeah, homebrew. For a knife. So in Spain, controlled by the French, somebody walking around with a knife. All right, Molly, got Capitol Hill something zone protesters taking over 6 blocks of Seattle. I see. Ron, disturbing. And then this one, of what will he die? Of what sickness will he die? He's going to die because of the doctor. But not this doctor. And maybe one of my favorites of the entire course. Dr. Arietta, a portrait and a self-portrait. Yeah, it's interesting that I'm just making a connection. This is one that's at the Minneapolis Institute of Art. So with these five, with the anger, the terror, the sadness, and maybe a little ray of hope. What would he paint if he were here today? Here's my top five. Police brutality. Number 4. The president administering medicine. Like that Atlantic cover, Angry Protesters. Mm-hmm. Portraits of hypocritical politicians. Yeah, Kim, or poison, administering poison. Number 2, the COVID morgue. And number 1, this is my number 1, COVID-19 ward at a hospital. All right, which one would you vote for here? Number 2, number 5, number 1, number 2, number 3. 1 and 5. Number 1, but you wouldn't want to see it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. So that's Goya. And Ron, you've got number 4. What was number 4 again? That was the president administering medicine. Oh, and Damon and Susanna, you've got, I think he would paint the virus stalking the world. Yeah, just like that Colossus. Marilyn, you've got in Idaho, citizens are standing with guns outside business so that protests will stay peaceful. It's not getting any press, but I think Goya would paint it. And Molly, you think you'd make that a Rembrandt? Well, talking about Marilene's. I don't know. I'm wondering if I might make it a Waterhouse. And Damon and Susanna, you might paint industry back at work, but not because of works we've seen here. Might paint it. Damon, if that's so, do you want to follow up and share why you're thinking that?
Sure. So one of my favorite paintings, or really my favorite painting of Goya is called The Forge. It's at the Frick. And it's just 3 men at a forge, and they're blacksmiths basically. But it's basically their figures, they're strong men and they're very focused. And it's just kind of, I wouldn't even say glorifying, but admiring their work and just showing their force. And so that's kind of a different aspect of him that you don't see much of, but that's what makes me think of Indristy, and that he does have this side where he can appreciate, a positive, creative act of a human being.
Yeah.
He doesn't paint it as a joyful scene exactly, but there is that admiration for that.
No, that's great. And a connection that I'm making, something we didn't talk much about, Francisco, he seemed to be a cynic when it came to aristocrats a lot, but he seemed to have a bond with commoners. And in a lot of his works, I think you can see that. There's only one from the what is it called again? The Tragedies of War, or the Horrors of War, whatever that title is of that series of prints. And I think it's print number 7 or 8. And if you Google the woman at the cannon, you might see something like that, an everyday person, kind of maybe like Dr. Arietta, shown in a little bit more positive light. And Ron, you've got number 4 is a subset of number 3. Yeah. And Molly, man straight into a hall, night watch, Oh, for Marilyn's idea of the men with guns protecting. And Susanna, you're thinking number 3, the portraits of hypocritical politicians. All right. So Waterhouse. Here are my 5 words. And this sparked some controversy in the other session, so I'm curious to see what you think. Tragedy, dignity, defiance, trapped, and melancholy. And I've got 2 that are similar there, tragedy and melancholy. Marilyn Beauty was one that a lot of others wanted to suggest. And then Marilyn, my follow-up question to that is what emotions are you associating with that beauty? So tragedy, I'm seeing more, and maybe tragedy is more similar to trapped. It's the situation that they're finding themselves in, a kind of tragic situation. Melancholy is maybe some of the response that the characters have, the feeling of what these people are feeling in this. And Marilyn, appreciation and love. Yep, Molly, confinement. Yeah, I think that's what I'm kind of going for with trapped. It could also be light, like gossip. That's true. Thanks for bringing that Waterhouse in. And Molly got Diogenes and the woman with a rope are emotionally trapped. Yeah, there's a lot of being trapped or being confined. Okay, so here are the 2 that we spent time with. Mariamne, accepting of her faith, but fate, but defiant towards those who judged her wrongly. And Mariana, as we see her in the middle of suffering. And Marilyn, your favorite of the whole course, Matan, you too, was Mariamne. And Kim, this is one you're referring to, Mariana? All right. So, top 5 things of what he would paint. Here's my number 5. Oh, the other. So Mariamne as well. Got it. A lot of love for Mariamne. I think that might be my favorite too. Yeah. So number 5. A defiant protester who happens to be a beautiful woman with long hair. And Molly got masked children. Maybe that being trapped or confinement you're thinking of. Number 4, the strength of a nurse looking over a patient who has lost their life. And maybe that captures a little bit of a difference between, say, Waterhouse and Rembrandt. Or Rembrandt might want to draw your sympathy, make you empathize with their plight, but with Waterhouse, you're going to see more of the strength of the characters. Oh, and Molly, you're saying our country forces us to wear masks in indoor businesses. Kids might need, confinement and caught. Number 3, police officers facing attacks from those they want to protect. Oh, that's an interesting observation there, Ron. Number 2, Dr. Burke's on stage with Trump, maintaining composure. So this was, I believe, from another session, and I don't know, I didn't know who Dr. Burks was, but there's video of when Trump was describing the things that you could ingest to help you or that you might ingest, and this is completely medically wrong. And Dr. Burks is a female doctor who is there as an advisor, and there's video of her sitting in the wings, kind of biting her lips as she is hearing the absurdities that are being said. And then one more, a woman running for president. So what do you think? Which one of these 5? Or wild card? And Amy, you've got number 5 in handcuffs. There you go. Mary Emney, huh? And Kim, you've got he'd paint a female doctor exhausted. And Molly, number 3, the most impactful for you. And number 5, if there's no destruction. Zach, number 5. And Kim, you can see what, or Amy, you can see what Kim was talking about with he'd paint a female doctor exhausted. And Lee, number 4, strength of a nurse looking over a patient who has lost their life. And number 3, if the officers include women. So police officers facing attacks from those they want to protect. All right, great. So we, over the course of the 8 weeks that we've done this course, have changed from one kind of trauma and social upheaval to another. And here's a question. If you had to pick one of these artists to hear from right now, which one would it be? Okay, and I think I've got a few questions that are going to be a good follow-up to that, so we'll discuss that question among others, but I'm seeing some Rockwells. So I'm asking this question a little bit out of order because there's one final artwork that I want to share with you. But I do want to get some similar questions in before we go to that final artwork. And Zach, depends on your mood, huh? So first question that's associated with this that I'd love to hear out of the 6 artists: Rockwell, Rembrandt, Goya, Caspar, Jan Vermeer, Waterhouse. Which artist is your kindred spirit? I'll go through the names again one more time. So Rockwell, Rembrandt, Caspar, Jan Vermeer, Goya, and Waterhouse. A lot of Caspar. And Damon and Susanna both Caspar Friedrich. Interesting. And that's the one that I think a lot of you weren't familiar with to begin with. And Kim, yeah, for the TTA 201 course, Miranda by Waterhouse. And Zach, I like that observation there because I think when I'm hearing what you guys are describing as your kindred spirits, I see that aspect of you, since I know many of you pretty well and some of you I've gotten to know a little bit. All right, so next question. Which artist exhibition would you go see first if they painted in 2020? And I think this is a similar question to the very first one there I asked about who would you want to see comment on the next crises right now, on the new crises. Waterhouse or Rockwell? Waterhouse. And Molly, try to be Vermeer, but sometimes you're Goya. Ron, you don't want to see Vermeer, and Damon Vermeer. Zach Kaspar. Matan, interesting difference. You're more like Kaspar, but you'd want to see Waterhouse. I could probably see them getting along, Kaspar and Waterhouse. Oh, sure, I'll be there, Molly. Okay. All right, and last question. Which artist would you most want to talk to over coffee? Or if you want to drink something harder? So maybe the slight difference in this question is there more you want to learn about this person individually, the artist themselves, in relation to their art? Do you think they'd be a fun hang? Romantic connection? Molly, you don't want to spend time with Kaspar, Amy with Kaspar, Kim with Vermeer, Marilyn with Rockwell. And Molly, you just want to listen to him speak German to you. And Ron, Edmund Blair Layton. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. And Molly, for romance, you'd want to talk to Waterhouse. I see. Matan Vermeer or Edmund Blair Layton. And Amy, you see Kaspar as deep. Dude was deep. We should put that on his on that portrait of him, just as and make that a meme. Dude was deep. Damon Vermeer. Yeah. And Susanna, you wanted to speak to Goya about mythology. Interesting. I bet, yeah. And all the different kinds of myths that he draws from, the lores of witches and witchcraft and things like that. Mm-hmm. And Amy, you want to invite Vermeer to your, okay, wait, hold on, Amy. I thought at first I read that as you want to invite Vermeer to your house. And you know what? That would probably be a lot of fun. He would probably, you know, if I were spending as much time in the kitchen as I've been, I would want Vermeer to observe me and capture me in my best moments in the kitchen or something like that. And put them all in a room. Okay, yeah. Oh, Caravaggio might kill Goya though. Okay. All right. No, that's fun. That's fun. So I've got one more painting for you if you guys want to stick around for 5 more minutes. And this last painting, we'll just do a quick title for it, and then we'll do a communal reading. So in the chat, or just unmute yourself. And this goes back to that first question I was asking. So if there was one artist you wanted to paint today with the protests and so forth, who would you want? So I think we have maybe the closest response to that with this artwork that I know of. And it's Norman Rockwell. So we'll do a quick title. And I'll be curious also, after you put down a quick title, let me know if you've seen this work before. So here it is. Quick title for that one. All right, Marilyn, you've got integration. Matan, walking right. Ron, so sad. Molly, innocent girl escorted. Kim, security detail going to school. Amy, determination. Lee, new school. Okay. If you haven't seen this one before, would you let me know that? Or would you say, just give a no in the chat? Just give a no if you haven't seen this one before. Damon, you've got innocence marched. So it looks like a lot of you have seen this before, and this is going to be very interesting because I don't know if I've shared my interpretation of the theme of this artwork before publicly. So we'll do the reading, and I'll take you through what I'm seeing as a situation and the kind of moment that's being depicted. All right, so what do you see? And Ron, you saw it in a booklet from the museum when you bought the Shiner print.
Bought it recently after our Rockwell session. I really like that Shiner.
Cool.
But this one is much more sad and serious. Yeah.
So that's interesting. Would you agree with Ron that this is sad and serious?
I just think it's sad that a little girl need the escort because there's so many bigots out there. And I also think it's sad that some people are completely misinterpreting, and I don't know, never mind, getting too political.
Okay. So some observations of what's going on here. She's got an escort, this young girl, and she's going to school. How would you describe her? She even needs an escort to school. Yeah. Forthright. She seems confident. She seems determined. Amy and Molly, I think you both thought that she was imitating the guards. Matan, you look at her as defiant. Ron is determined. What kind of sounds do you hear? What do you hear? Tomato splash and people yelling, taunts, jeers, splats. Maybe leather shoes on the sidewalk. But Kim, I'm wondering if you would be able to hear those leather shoes in the midst of this charged crowd. So not only do we have the tomato, but we saw the graffiti as well on the wall, a couple of portions of graffiti. So it looks like this graffiti was put there beforehand, knowing what route that she would take to go to school. Mm-hmm. All right, so Molly, you want to see her face a little bit more closely? Well, we got her pose here. And Molly, you've got people behind barricades held off from threatening her. Let's take a look at her face a little bit more. I don't know if that close-up is going to satisfy, but what does she look like? Does she look terrified? Okay, maybe I should have gotten a closer up. So compare her to, for example, what would Goya paint terror or sadness like on her face? So I think also what would help here, when I've taught this painting before, is this is a great one to take the pose. To take her pose. And to notice how her back is arched back and her chin is lifted. And her chest is out. And her mouth isn't pursed. Think of Mariamne, Molly. Think of Mariamne's mouth. And her eyes are direct. There's no furrow in the brows. She's not trying to look determined. Maybe there's something in that right hand with a closed fist. Maybe a little bit of a stiff upper lip. Yeah, I think I see the mark that you're thinking of as a teardrop, Molly. But no teardrop. Now, she's moving forward, maybe looks determined in her posture. But where is she getting that posture from? And a couple of you have pointed that out already. Notice her stride almost being the same as the US Marshals that are there, with the fist clenched, and the rhythmic motion forward. Maybe she's tuning out the noise. And if you push play on this, there's a steady gait from all of them. Almost a rhythmically steady gait. Like she is a little soldier. So why is she imitating them? And Zach, you've got, she looks like she's thinking, just like Mama told me, ignore the haters and keep moving forward. And Amy, you've also got, that's what kids do, as to why she's imitating them. Yeah, and I was hoping to hear from the parents out there. I'm not a parent. I draw on many of my child experiences from myself or my niece, or occasionally tour groups or students. But this is something that I see a lot of, especially around the ages of like 4, 5, 6, 7, where there's a lot of interest in imitating what adults are doing. And so when I'm seeing this, I'm seeing her imitate something. Her mom probably told her, you know, ignore the haters, keep going. And then she sees these US Marshals around her with their attitude towards the crowd. They're just striding forward, ignoring them with this kind of rhythmic determination. And she sees them and she says, that's what courage and ignoring the haters looks like. And so I'm going to do that. Yeah, Matan. And I think that's the key part. She is seeing them as a model for how to behave under a strenuous situation where she may not completely understand exactly what's going on. She may not completely understand the ramifications of what she's doing here. What Ruby Bridges, the first African-American girl to be integrated into a school in Louisiana, into a white school in Louisiana. And so she had to be accompanied by US Marshals every day that she went to school. And she's striding forward. I'd say maybe she's in misstep, but similarly to them, looking up to them as a mentor for, or as a model for admirable behavior. So why do I love this artwork and why do I think it fits so well Rockwell's spirit? Well, he's taking a moment of racial tension, tremendous racial tension and looking at it from a child's perspective, giving us an insight into what children do, which is to look up to others, to find those qualities that they want. And they might not understand it completely, but they will imitate you in those. And who is she imitating? These 4 white US Marshals. Yeah. So I think, Marilyn, you're saying it looks like a big burden, huge burden. I don't think she realizes the kind of burden that's going on. And I think she's found a way to cope with whatever it is that is the burden that she sees. Somebody from the last class was sharing a little bit about Ruby Bridges' memories of her first day. And she was describing how she wasn't really aware of why people were so upset. Yeah, that's Ron. That's what I'm talking about. And I bet those are really easy to find. And that she would have one teacher that she would go see. She was the only student in the classroom and a white teacher. And she just enjoyed that time that she spent with that teacher because she was so nice. But this is not a Waterhouse painting, right? Waterhouse might focus on the men and maybe a little bit of grim understanding and more determination. It's not Goya. Goya might focus on that, on the terrible crowd. This is not Vermeer. Vermeer might spend time in the classroom alone with that teacher as she's thinking about it, or before with her mom. And this is not Friedrich, where Friedrich might spend time with the wall before everything, the wall at dawn before everything comes up, or the wall at dusk with all the graffiti on it. And Vermeer might show her getting dressed, yeah. And this is not Rembrandt, who might show the mom at home worried. This is Rockwell. Yeah, Molly. So I wanted to end there. And I want to thank you all for spending these 7 classes with me. And to thank you especially for hanging in with me for something I've never done before. And this, I felt like, has been a graduate school year that I feel lucky to have had. It's helped answer a question that I have had for over 20 years, ever since my first art history class in college. And that question has been, why don't I like art history? And the follow-up, how would I approach it? And so this has been my experiment in finding out how I would enjoy approaching art history and seeing if it's a way that is communicable and that you enjoy also, by first personally connecting to the art itself and then seeing if the artist also personally connects to it. I'm looking at doing some more of these kinds of courses in the future with a different realm of life, maybe romantic love, maybe family, maybe career, something like that, and seeing how different spirits would approach. And Amy, that's very interesting. It's a connection with the present that helped make the history interesting. Thanks for that. I'll be sending out a survey just to get your feedback, your thoughts, and what parts you especially liked, and anything you would suggest to change, or if there were some parts that were a little bit more dull than others, then I'd love that feedback. And I'll invite you to stay in touch with me through the new podcast, Surprised by Art, where it's kind of a similar idea, where there's a topic that my friend Kirk Barbera and I present on together I pick a painting that fits the topic, and he presents a poem, and we surprise each other with those on air. And Molly, I'm glad to know that you feel like you know the people. Be great, Matan. Yeah, I'd enjoy meeting you all in person too. All right, everybody. Thank you for sticking around for extended hours for these classes. I always say that. And I look forward to seeing you guys again soon. Stay in touch. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Luke. This was a great class.
Thanks, Matan.
I know.
Thanks.
Thanks, Ron.